Hey everyone, it's Ten Types, and recently I was playing I was gonna say fun and exciting Pokemon TCG deck, but I don't know if that's the case, and that's actually what we're gonna be talking about today. That deck was Crustle. Crustle is an okay Pokemon, right? I feel like most people would probably agree on that. I'm sure people will argue its power level. Some will definitely think it's a lot higher than others, honestly, because it's a Pokemon that doesn't see that much play, but definitely can be powerful when you play it. We're not talking about the power level of these cards too much today, though. I guess we're talking about them some, but today we're talking about walling decks and decks that are similar, as well as walling cards. Though, to be honest, they mostly are decks essentially entirely to themselves. So these Pokemon and walling cards in general, if you're not familiar with that term, which is used pretty commonly, walling Pokemon are Pokemon that are essentially immune to damage, sometimes also effects of attacks. I suppose they could just be immune to effects of attacks, though I wouldn't really ever call it a wall. But anyways, Crustle here, for example, is immune to damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. I suppose if you're not familiar, I mean, just read the ability, right? It's damage from attacks from EXs. Sometimes people get this wrong. It's only damage, not effects of attacks. So if your opponent has Dragapult EX, for example, they can place damage counters on this through the use of the attack on your bench, right? So they could do that. That is damage counters, which is an effective attack, not damage, and it's from attacks, right? So if there's some abilities all place damage counters anyway, but if there was an ability that did damage, it stops attacks, not abilities. Sometimes people get confused about that. Just want to clarify that because I've seen people, get confused by it. Just read the cards. It's generally straightforward, but anyways, you're immune to damage here. But this is most things, right? If you look at, a deck like, we're just gonna take a look at the metagame here. Like most of these top decks here, Dragapult EX itself, which is the Dragapult deck is headed by Dragapult EX, which is the Pokemon that you're going to be attacking with most of the time. I suppose you're kind of setting up behind Budew, but Budew's not attacking to do damage. It does a little bit of damage, but certainly that will not be toppling the big, massive 150 HP Crustle. Yeah, it's not the strongest Pokemon. Generally, walls aren't super strong raw stats wise. I guess 150 HP for a stage 1 single prizer is big. The damage 120 for 3 isn't big, and I'll actually talk about one design decision about the attacks as well, which I've actually talked about a bunch, but I'll talk about again, which is kind of interesting and worth noting because some people aren't aware of it. But Dragapult EX, Dragapult EX is doing a bunch of damage. You have stuff like Dusknoir, you have something like Breakloak, I guess. You could attack with Dusknoir as well. Obviously, Dusknoir, you want to use the ability, but the attack's actually not bad, I guess. I mean, it's not very good, right? I wouldn't really recommend it, but against a deck like Crustle or something kind of similar to that, then yeah, Dusknoir, I mean, theoretically, it one-shots it, right? That's kind of cool there. Yeah, Monkey Door you could attack with, and yeah, you can do things like that. They're not very good options, though, so, well, there is some interesting counterplay from these different decks. If we go to a deck like and Zorak as well, which also apparently this deck's like super popular. I'm interested in hearing in the comment section if people have been playing against this deck a lot. I've been playing against it like a good amount. I was surprised because it's like okay, and it's not even that new in terms of like it doesn't have that many new pieces from Ascended Heroes. It has one, right? Really one, or I guess Pokepad as well. But it's got and Zekrom, which is a new piece, which does help the deck. I'm not going to sit here and deny that, but it doesn't like completely change the deck. But anyways, Enzoric is being played a bunch, and here again against Crustle, you don't have that many interesting plays. Obviously, Enzoric can't attack you. I guess they can use Shred. They can use Shred, which is worth mentioning. They will get hit for a weakness, so that's not great. Then you have Enstarmantan, which you can attack with, kind of. So there are some interesting dynamics there. Certainly, though, this is not the dynamic you're normally looking to go for with this deck. This applies to essentially every multi-prize deck in the game. I think outside of, let me see, can I find an example with a Shred style attacker? I don't see one Well, I guess I do. There's Cornerstone Massacre or Pontiacs, but that's also probably not going to go very well for you, so I'm not counting that one. But for the oh, I will also mention there is Megalopony EX. Megalopony EX's second attack goes through cards like this. It isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, just like the attack on Crustle here itself, actually. So that is a counter to these kinds of decks. If you are worried about them, you can play Megalopony. Megalopony EX can do some different things, but is quite powerful against a deck like this because it just kind of cuts through it. Mostly, it's not completely an auto win, but it is good there. But anyways, with Crustle, as I said as well, the attack your Superb Scissors here it goes through effects on your opponent's Pokemon. In some ways, this is thematic with, scissors cutting through your opponent's like effects. Kind of cool there, I guess. But we see this on a wide variety of different walling Pokemon. For example, Cornerstone Massacre Pontiacs, which I kind of mentioned there, which hits through Pokemon, but is a wall as well. Cornerstone Massacre Pontiacs is a good wall. It is a basic, so obviously generally basic Pokemon are better. Every deck is running basic Pokemon, or is running a basic Pokemon at least. It's required to. There aren't many deck requirements. That is one of the deck requirements there. And so if you have a basic wall, that can be tacked into a lot of decks, especially on an ability. You can have walls on attacks as well. For example, there's a new Deoxys from Ninja Spinner / Chaos Rising that is a walling Pokemon, essentially like Cornerstone Massacre Pontiacs, but only walls after it attacks. This is an effect of an attack, so this means that if your opponent switches it in and out, then they will be able to essentially get through it. It like turns the effects of the attack off there. And if it's an ability, they could ability lock you and turn the ability off. So there are pros and cons. Though generally the abilities are a lot better, but it does depend on the metagame and what the options are for both. I guess specifically post rotation, we're losing a bunch of different cards that are switching / bullshit or something. I don't know. Something like Iron Bundle, right? Where that card is switching. It doesn't matter what you switch out. You will need to gust. Sometimes people say double gust. But anyways, we are losing those, so I guess I will mention that effects of attacks might stay more. But with these ability Pokemon on like basics like Cornerstone Massacre Pontiacs, when I say like it, there aren't too many other Pokemon like it. You just kind of toss it down, and it's really difficult to deal with. There's also Pokemon like Mimikyu. Mimikyu has essentially the same exact ability as Crustle. I will also mention Mimikyu also has an attack that goes through. Well, Mimikyu doesn't stop Mimikyu. Crustle doesn't stop Crustle. But even if it did, it would go through it. This is, again, something we see pretty commonly. We see it with Fighting Ogerpon. We see it with Trapghost EX. We see it with, like, pretty much every single one, right? We will see it in essentially every single one. The reason for this, if you're not familiar, is so that if you have two of these Pokemon against each other, then you're able to do stuff. Essentially, more times you'll be able to not be stuck in stalemates. You don't want two walls, either of the same type or of different types, being stuck against each other, because that's not fun. Now, it can happen. It's not something that is completely foolproof. You can end up in board states where nothing really happens. That's not super common, though. The fact that these attacks go through each other isn't really the reason why, though. But anyways, figured I would mention that because it is interesting and very important to know. Again, it's something people often forget. People, don't play walls too much. People don't play against walls, even more so. So they forget these things. And of course, people don't play with these decks and against these decks too much because they're not super fun, right? This is the thing we need to get to, and this is definitely the thing that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Civil arguments, if you like these, if you don't like them. But, they can be pretty annoying, and they can be kind of interesting as well. We'll talk about the positives of them at the, a bit later. Obviously, their cards, people like to try different things. That's a basic part of it, but you could say, for example, a card existing doesn't mean it's well designed. If there's a card that just instantly won you the game, and it was like an item, you just played it and you won. In some sense, it's fair. Either player could play it turn one on their first turn. The coin flip is 50-50, so if you win the coin flip, which is fair, I guess I think fair is the right word. It's 50 there. Then you can win, right? You can win there. So, and it can just be a part of the game, but that's not fun. Obviously, that's an exaggerated example, not a real card, but that wouldn't be good. And so a card being broken doesn't mean it's fun, even though it can be fun to play, right? Playing powerful cards can be fun, but it does not mean they're well designed. For example, Dragapult EX is super powerful. Looking at current standard, it's super powerful. Looking at post rotation, it's even more powerful, and that is definitely a bit problematic. At some point, I'll probably talk about the design and power level of Dragapult EX and whether or not it's actually a problem. And again, tell me in the comment section if you want to see that video. I always like ideas and suggestions on video ideas. But Crustle isn't super broken, but it is, a card that is not fun. I'd say powerful cards, overpowered cards, are essentially bad because they're not fun to play against. Same thing with Crustle, not because it's overpowered, but because it's a little unfun to play against. Because as I was talking about with a lot of these decks, you have to really change your game plan. If you're playing Goldengo, what do you want to do? You probably want to do Goldengo stuff, right? But now you need to pivot to like Mega Lopunny. But is that as fun? No, and if you don't play it, you just kind of lose, right? So it's not super fun. Playing around with Soul Rocks and stuff can lead to some interesting and certainly different gameplay, but it's not that fun, right? These cards can really stop you from doing things you want to do. And again, while they can have interesting dynamics to them, it's something, if you play it, you're kind of signing up for that and you're like, oh yeah, this is cool. But if you're playing against it, you're not really signing up for it, especially because they are a small part of the game. If they were a lot of decks, for example, in expanded format, you have a lot of what I describe as pseudo control options. You have stuff like Budew, which we'll talk about Budew. Budew in some ways is similar to Crustle, but with which I will get to. They are certainly not the same, but they have similarities. A card like Budew is good and expanded. You have Wobbuffet, you have Path, you have Ranger as like a counterplay there. So you have a lot of, which is not a counterplay, but to Budew. It's not counterplay to all those things, but you have different counterplays there, and slowing your opponent down and different things like that. You have item lock, you have turn lock, you have different things, and that is a part of the format. When you're playing the format, you're kind of signing up for that. But when you're playing standard, in some ways you're signing up to play with Budew, a very powerful card, but you're not really signing up to play with Crustle, right? So if you're playing online, you might just concede. I played this deck, as I said, and most of my opponents conceded. There were some interesting board states, some really interesting back and forths, but they weren't really what people signed up for. So even though they were interesting competitive matches, some of the time people just didn't want to play that. And looking at a Pokemon like Budew, as I said, it's a little similar. It's stopping your opponent. It's stopping them from playing items. It's not going to be this auto win button or complete shutdown of everything they have. Realistically, there can't really be a deck that if it gets item locked, you can't really do your game plan. I suppose with Goldengo, you can run out of energies, theoretically. I guess I've seen that happen. I don't know. It's very rare, right? You need to hit them at the right time, and it's kind of a gamble, but anyways, you could theoretically do that against someone, Goldengo player, but they're going to be able to set up and like do stuff first, right? You're not going to just Budew the whole game and just win. You're not going to win doing that. And I was actually recently playing as well. Maybe I'm just an annoying player to play against. I play a wide variety of decks, but I was playing Monkey Dory Frostlass, which also has been like going up and seeing more play. I guess the reason is because of Mega Frostlass, though it's not actually a big part of the deck. So that's interesting. But anyways, I was playing a deck similar to this, except even more Budew focused. I essentially Budewed like every turn. And so it was something. Yeah, it was something. Was it good? No, it wasn't super good. It was kind of okay. And ultimately, again, power level wise, it was fine. Budew's also the deck was fine. Budew is like kind of broken because it's a card that gets a free attack with 3 retreat on a basic that item locks. Item lock can be very powerful. There are certainly a lot of powerful items in standard. Look at the deck, just like Goldengo here, you got a bunch of items. I don't feel like counting right now, but it's a good amount, and certainly there are a bunch of decks with a lot of items, and you can really set your opponent back in the game. You also kind of slow yourself down because you're not doing an attack to set yourself up. You're not doing an attack to do big damage. You're doing 10, so you're not doing very big damage at all here. You're essentially not doing damage, so you're slowing both people down, and this is also what happens with Crustle. You are slowing both people down, because Crustle, as I said, isn't like a powerhouse Pokemon, and certainly nor is Budew, but Budew, again, isn't completely shutting your opponent down. It is annoying, though. It's, the attack name is Itchy Pollen. What are you expecting? It is annoying. But with Crustle here, again, it's something that is less common. It's less splashable into different decks. Budew can go into any deck in the game, realistically. It doesn't belong in every deck in the game because, if you're a deck like, say, let's look at Gardevoir here. You could actually play Budew, but you can run Frillish, which essentially works better. They're a little different. That's not the best example. You also have a deck like Goldengo, trying to go faster. I got the list up here. And you're just looking for that play. Badoo's not really going to align with your game plan. And make Absol Box here. Looking at this deck, you're looking to Terminal going second, Team Turbo Energize, right? So you have these different game plans. We also see Frillish in the deck though, and this effect is powerful, right? It is something you could use in any deck versus not, that's not really the case with Crustle. Crustle though, as said, is more deck build around in the way it's played. If we pull up a Crustle list, which is here, it's the 26th deck. Win rate is pretty decent. I mean, it's fine. I guess it is probably the best way to say it. But there are decks above it that oh yeah, Mega Dragon Knight. That's a new deck. It's pretty bad. But anyways, we have Crustle. We have Crustle here, and it just runs Crustle, right? This is very similar to the list I ran that I was playing earlier today, and it was very simple, very linear, and because when you're using your walls are really powerful potentially if you get them set up and going. You need to devote a bunch of resources to it, and on top of that, you also can't have too many other Pokemon floating around, because if you do, then your opponent's gonna be able to go ahead and go after this Pokemon, gust them up, and win the game that way. We also have the card like Iron Thorns EX, which also works very similarly. And we also have Mega Kangaskhan. Mega Kangaskhan is a little different here. I'll quickly mention this. This is also kind of a wall. This is pretty different. It's mostly a Pokemon with big HP. Theoretically, you could loop this with Penny or something like that and win. You can see this in control decks as a stall option to win. Potentially. Obviously, Mega Kangaskhan has a draw ability. It has an attack that can one-shot anything technically, and or like theoretically. I guess there are some things it can't one-shot. But anyways, with Mega Kangaskhan EX here, you have a Pokemon that can be a wall, and because of its HP there. That being said, I'd say it's in a different boat, but if you have a Pokemon that is exclusively there just to essentially tank hits and then heal, I would say that's in a similar category. We saw Mewtwo Reunion like that in the past a while ago, and that was V-Unions are a whole different animal, right? But with Mega Kangaskhan EX here, it can be a walling Pokemon, but obviously has a lot more depth to it as well. And I think it's a pretty well-designed card. It's pretty fair. It's pretty cool. I don't know. It's a cool card. It's a cool card. But with Iron Thorns EX, I would say people would also be on a similar boat to Crustle. Iron Thorns EX is more similar to Budew in the fact that it restricts the resources your opponents can play and use, essentially stopping effects of stopping abilities, actually removing the abilities. They no longer have the abilities on them. So if you want to do something based on abilities, it wouldn't work. They are gone. They aren't just unusable. They are gone. But anyways, with this Pokemon, you are stopping your opponent's ability if it's in the active. And here you really need to clamp down on your opponent with this card, leaving this in the active, because if it's out of the active, your opponent can just use all their resources. Same thing with Jellicent EX. But this is a basic, right? This is a basic you can just toss down. Theoretically, you can splash into a deck to slow down your opponent, but if you want to use it to its fullest potential, you need to really lean in. And I think this is where these decks get annoying. Now, on the other hand, they do slow down the metagame, which can be good and counter some very powerful stuff. I was talking about how these multi-prizers are very good, and they are probably too good. The reason people play single price decks like, say, Alakazam or I guess Regular Frostless, not really. Festival Leader and Team Roxanne are better examples there. And I imagine this is true. I guess theoretically it could not be true. Most people play these decks because they're single price decks, and that's kind of cool, right? People don't usually play these decks because they're super good, because they're not. They're not super bad. They're okay. I guess, but they're definitely a little weaker. People like to play new decks, like the Ends, I guess, is kind of a new deck. Team Roxanne new deck. Process Megidori, I mentioned, kind of a new deck there. And people like to play single price decks, as I said as well, because they are a little different, because there's something cool and exciting. But ultimately, they aren't as good as multi-price decks, so playing these Pokemon that are pure counters to multi-price decks can be good for the health of the metagame. It's kind of, making a card that's a little unpleasant to slow down the game. For example, in people's defense of Budew, I've heard people say that Budew is good for the game because it slows down the game. This is a complicated argument that I'm not getting into here. It's not. I mean, it's obviously subjective what makes a game fun or not, right? So I'm not, anyone can have their opinions on that. but Budew and the ways it slows down the game isn't necessarily, a game being longer is some ways better because it allows more decisions to be made and more expression of skill, as well as other things. You can just like do more different things the more turns you have in a game. It can allow you to play like slower decks and do some cool stuff there. You won't always win, but you'll actually be able to play the game. If you played some of the single prize decks, like actually all those single prize decks I said, except for Monkey Door Frostlast, I guess. Though even playing that, you can experience that. But with Alakazam, with Festival Lead, with Max Tanskro, you can like obliterate your opponent or get obliterated, and it can flip flop. It's quite chaotic there because you need to be scrambling to keep up with these big multi-prize decks. But if you want to play like a simpler single prize deck, like I don't know, there aren't any like that. Right? There are not any like that really at all. Rocket Smite Ops, maybe. I don't even know what this deck is. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna click on this real quick. This is Rockets, like Team Rockets, but with more single prize focus there. I guess I've never like seen anyone play this as opposed to this here. But anyways, except for Crustle. Crustle does fit that. It's a relatively slow deck in terms of the energy. It's 3 energy. You don't accelerate energy that much. It's a Pokemon that does not that much damage. It does some damage. It's not like horrendous. It's more than Solnock. It's more than Fanrotom, which are okay options. Pokemon that see play and do attack. They don't see play just to attack, but they do see play and they do attack. And you have like moderate HP, right? You're not some like massive Pokemon in terms of HP. You're doing normal Pokemon stuff. If you're a new player, this is like a normal Pokemon, ignoring the ability, doing some pretty normal tame stuff that can be fun, right? And Crustle can do that, but then in order to do that game plan, you need to lean fully into it, and then it kind of loses that fun, kind of casual element to it. Now you're just sitting and you're like saying, I want to play this quote normal game, this more tame game, more similar to a format like themed, playing with like new decks, like that, which it doesn't exist anymore. But with that format, there are some similarities to that with the some of the, I guess, mega battle decks, but it's not quite the same. But with that format, you're playing a more slow, game plan, and you have to pull your opponent down to it, which can be really annoying, because you're pulling it down by removing, essentially, if you think of it as a person, you're removing one of their legs, and that kind of sucks, because now you can't do your main game plan, as in like a bunch of it. So now you need to pivot, and there are interesting things there, but ultimately, I don't know, it really gets annoying at times. And there are times you just can't get through it at all as well. So ultimately, I don't know. It's kind of the reason I made this video was honestly to just kind of think about it. I suppose I haven't come with a final conclusion here that these decks are good or bad for the game. They obviously help slow down the game in a way that some people do enjoy to play with. And I'm certainly not going to sit here and deny that. I do enjoy playing these decks. In fact, after recording this, I'm probably going to go and play some more Crustle. I'm not sure. We'll see. But I might do that. But they also can make people not have fun to play against them. And a well-designed card is fun to play with and fun to play against. It adds something new to the game. This card here in deck is definitely something different, and so that's good, generally. But is it fun to play against? I'd say generally it's not fun to play against. It adds some new elements, but generally isn't super fun. Is it fun to play with? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. You do some stuff. You don't do a ton of stuff, but you do some stuff. So it can be something that people do enjoy. I think it's mostly different, and different can be good. It's a small part of the game. If this was a big part of the game, like when Iron Thorns was super good, I mean, people just didn't play it that much. People were like, this is a rogue deck, but not because it's bad. It was good. And same thing with Snorlax, and with, I'm trying to think. There's like Milotic EX. There are a variety of walls, and generally they're better than people think they are because, again, they're not played that much. But ultimately, they can do some cool stuff for the game, but I'm not really sure where I stand on them. If you play Budew, the deck, is it good? I mean, people see this Pokemon more, so they're more frustrated by it. People are frustrated by all sorts of different things at different times as well. But anyways, tell me down below in the comment section what your thoughts are, if you think walls are good or bad for the game, and if you want to see more of them, if you think there's a better way to design them. There are different ways to design counter cards, but some of them are fast, explosive, and aggressive, which is pretty different. For example, punishing your opponent for playing a bunch of Pokemon like EXs if it did damage based on EXs. You could have some crazy broken single parser that obliterates EXs, but that's not slowing the game down; it's speeding it up, which in terms of balance could work, but in terms of gameplay, it changed it in the opposite direction of Crustle. But tell me down below your thoughts in the comment section. But I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like and subscribe. That really helps support the channel. You can also hit the bell as well. But I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you like the video because that really does help. And if you actually enjoy it, right? Like the video if you enjoy it, and subscribe if you subscribe it, as they say. No, but if you enjoy watching my channel, actually make sure you do those things, not just as a generic thing, but because it does help me and it helps you as well if you enjoy it. But I hope you enjoyed, and I'm excited to see you in the next video.